One of the questions was a request for a reading list of book recommendations for people just getting into the topic, presumably the topic of ancient history or perhaps specifically Roman history. And that's one of the problems, is that obviously this is a very big field. My own books span from late antiquity back all the way through to Philip and Alexander, with lots of Roman stuff in between. I'm currently working on a book on the 5th century BC, so that'll be out in a year or two. So you're dealing with 1,000 years or more of history, and there are lots of topics within that. So I've got to be careful on that ground. I wouldn't say there's one book that will start you off and tell you everything, but there are topics, so we'll talk about a few and suggest a few authors. There is also the element of the wholly subjective taste thing, in that different authors have different styles, different historians, different approaches as well as focuses, and something that might click wonderfully with me wouldn't necessarily work with everybody else, and something that leaves me cold might spark an interest that will grow into much, much more in another person. It's one of those things, and you can't really explain or persuade someone you should read this because it's really, really good. So obviously vanity must dictate that I suggest some of my own books, in that everything I write is written, other than the few old academic articles and tomes from the early on, it's written on the basis that anyone sufficiently interested to pick up the book and want to know about that topic can follow it. I hope there are more respectable things for those in terms of ideas, interpretations, bits you didn't know, or ways you haven't thought about things before, for those who've already read a fair bit about the subject, though I'm not primarily writing for fellow scholars or anything like that, because this is a commercial thing for me, and this is how I make my living, is writing books. But also, I find the ancient world and ancient history incredibly exciting, absolutely fascinating and enthralling, and I'd like to try and sort of show that to other people, share that with other people, because it is, apart from it, the advantages of it, it shows you the roots of so many aspects of our own culture, but also it tells you about human beings, about people, about how they act. The more history you read, the more you should understand humans, and therefore the world today, and what might be coming in the future. So I see a lot of advantages with that. So obviously I reckon my stuff it's certainly tailored to my particular taste. Otherwise, it's really a question of what sort of topic interests you. So there are some very readable authors. Obviously, have a look at Tom Holland's stuff, particularly Rubicon, his first one, and Persian Fire, about the Rubicon, about the 1st century BC and the decline of the Roman Republic, and then Persian Fire, focusing very much on the Persian invasions of Greece in the early 5th century, but more broadly about the Persians, the Greek cities, and this sort of thing. They're very readable. They give you a really good... They're the equivalent of doing the sort of courses we all studied at university if we studied ancient history. Those are key periods that you'll look at. So it's very good to know something about those, the personalities, the events, the narratives, the story, so that you can start to make sense of the rest of Greek and Roman history, respectively. And they're good reads. So although those were out a while ago now, they're very good, very well worth picking up. Barry Strauss is another name you can always trust. So, book on Salamis, book on Spartacus, Caesar's murder. He's written a lot. I've reviewed several of them. I've got most of them, and the ones I haven't read I'll get around to when there's a spare moment. Very different literary style to mine. His is more dramatic, almost not fictionalized in place, because you'll get these vivid descriptions of a moment in history of a time, and it reads almost like a novel, but if you know your stuff, you can see, okay, he's saying that because that's in this source. He's saying that because that's the deduction from this. There is a basis behind it all. It's not my style. Don't think I could write that way, and also because I do write novels as well, I've got to keep the two styles very, very separate. I can't let my non-fiction blur into my fiction and vice versa. But anything by Barry Strauss is well worth a look. And as I say, style is a subjective thing. There might be a few people who won't click with it, but I think most will. And you will be getting good information with all of us, whether it's my stuff, Tom's stuff, Barry's stuff. There are other ways of looking at the sources. Ancient history rarely gives us absolute certainty on a lot of aspects of the subject. So details, chronology, let alone when you get into motivation, explanation of why some of these things worked. So, excuse me, I'm just going to let Gussie out the door. You going out, Gus? There you go. Right. He's not calling today, so I'm afraid we won't get the Berman accompaniment or descant to my ramblings. So you don't have to agree with everything I say, with everything Barry says, with everything Tom says, but their arguments, their interpretations are well worth considering, and none of us can prove our case. So there'll be moments where we disagree with each other. So between the two of them, they give you quite a broad range of introductions. Another name you can trust for readable and accessible coverage of a wide range of subjects in ancient history is my old friend Philip Matjack. Hopefully I'll get him on for a video and we'll start doing some discussions and conversations and interviews in the months to come. But I've got to sort that out and sort out my technology. But Matty and I were at Oxford together doing our doctorates, and again, he's got a different style to mine. I probably couldn't write in the way he does. He probably couldn't write in the way I do. But he's very good. He's much more to the point, far more succinct than I am without all the waffle. So as you'll notice, even with these videos getting out of hand, and the short answers to questions are often far longer than they should be. So Matty's written, first started off mostly with Roman history, but he's gone way beyond that. There's a lot of Greek stuff and more general. A lot of it's by Thames and Hudson. His Chronicle of the Roman Republic, I think, was one of the early ones, but there's been, was it Rome on 5 denarii a day, and the idea of these sort of travel guides to the ancient world that pack in a lot of very good information that's come from the sources in a really accessible way. So again, like all styles, it'll click with you or it won't, but in Matty's case, he's probably written something that will click with you, because he can flip between these different styles of doing it. So whether you're wanting, he's done more specific things on the Syracusan expedition in the Peloponnesian War, Marius and that period, the build up to Sulla, Cimbri, Teutones. There's a lot of stuff out there. I can't list them all, because although he started publishing books, I think a little bit after me, he's written far more than me in the time and shows no sign of slowing down. So it's another name you can trust, because he's the real deal. He has written the academic stuff as well, but he's a good communicator. So it's all that you'd really want. And because he's covered so many different things, there's a fair chance that if you have a particular interest, there'll be something by him that you might like. So that's another good recommendation. As I say, you can trust the name and think, yeah, this will be good when you pick it up. Thinking back to Greek stuff, even though it's been out for 40 odd years or so now, maybe slightly more. Lan Fox's Alexander biography is a very good read with a lot behind it, and he uses the life of Alexander to talk more generally about Greek society, Persian society, all these sorts of things. And while there have been new interpretations, some new discoveries since then, it stands up and it's readable. You want something written by a communicator, unless you are absolutely fascinated by the subject itself. To get started, you need somebody who can, in a sense, tell a story and explain. And all of those authors are very good. Mary Beard, of course, is another one. Tends to be more thematic in her approach. The latest one about emperors covers a broad range of the sort of things emperors did. Again, a natural communicator with the knowledge to have something worth communicating. So well worth a look. But again, it's the same truth with all of us. When you're writing a book that tries to cover a lot, you have to simplify some things. Oh, there's Gussie going in the background, so he's joining in anyway. My biography of Caesar, for instance, to do the equivalent of that and cover all those topics in full academic depth would be 10 or 20 volumes. You could probably write a book about every chapter, and there would still be arguments, and you'd be referring to various articles and interpretations about specific details of legislation, or who were the magistrates in this particular year, and which family was related to which other one, this sort of thing. So we all have to simplify, and we all have to try and give you a sense of it, and also a sense that the other thing I'd mention about all the people I've talked about today, they give you an idea of how we get to this conclusion. They try to show you how ancient historians go about their business. And that's worth understanding from the start. There is a danger that you just come in and think, well, everything's certain, we know this, boom, 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 right, fair enough. And then if anyone starts to cast doubt upon it, you think, well, they don't really know their stuff. So any of these authors, very good starting places. Otherwise, it very much depends on the topic. So, in my own case, I remember they had a book in the children's library. It was a cadet version of a book called The Great Invasion by a fellow called Leonard Cottrell about the Roman invasion of Britain that I took out and renewed time and time again and read repeatedly. As I say, it's always hard to know what will inspire someone. The other series of books I would mention, because although unfortunately he's no longer with us, but profound influence on me was the late great Peter Connelly. And it's easy to dismiss his books as meant for children because they're so wonderfully illustrated, because that was his background. But he became so interested and had such a practical mind and such attention for detail that when there's his book with Hazel Dodge on the ancient city, there's the one on Pompeii, some of these are still in print, some of them you can get, there's quite a lot of second-hand ones around you can order, and again, it can be a great way in. You show, this is what we're talking about, this is what it looked like, or this is what it might have looked like. And sometimes the pictures can explain things far faster and give you a better sense of what this might have been like. His Greece and Rome at War is definitely in print. There was a new edition a while back, because I know, because I think I wrote a foreword, or whatever, I can't remember what they called it, whether it was foreword or preface. That's still a marvellous book. Yes, there have been new discoveries since he wrote it. And there is a bit of a gap. He doesn't really cover Julius Caesar's campaigns, which he does in his earlier book, The Roman Army, which was the book that sparked me off really more than anything else, because he was planning to do a detailed book on Caesar and sadly didn't live to finish that. But nevertheless, you've got that combination. If you're at all inclined to the military side of things, don't think there's a better starting place. There are plenty of other good books out there, but this is probably the best place to begin. So those are a few suggestions, but there are other books, and it's worth just, if you get a chance in your local library, having a look, see what they've got, and then you might find something with a style that suits you, and that, or on the topic, the particular theme. Some people are more interested in the archaeological aspects of it. Some people get fascinated by Pompeii. So again, good Mary Beard book on the subject. There are lots of others. There's a Peter Connelly one as well, which is another very good one, though obviously older. Others, it might be aspects of high politics, of drama, of the personal relationships between Augustus and his family, Tiberius, the Julio-Claudians, Antony and Cleopatra, Caesar, Pompey, all these people. It might be one particular province, one particular region. So if if you happen to live in an area that was in the Roman Empire, then often that history can be particularly fascinating because it relates to real places. So there's a lot out there, but it's very much a subjective thing which will suit you. But there's a few suggestions that hopefully help to get a few people started. Right, that's it for today.